Florence Williams' Heartbreak is the post-breakup balm you need. Part memoir, part scientific study, after receiving the disorienting news that her husband of 25 years wanted a divorce so he could find his soulmate, author and journalist Florence Williams followed her instincts on how to cope. She wrote about it. The author of the well-received nonfiction books Breasts, A Natural and Unnatural History, and The Nature Fix, Why Nature Makes Us Happier, Healthier, and More Creative, set off on a quest to understand her psychological and physiological responses to her own heartbreak, and what to do about it based on scientific data measuring biological markers and long-term health outcomes. I have the physical copy of the book, but I admit I listened to it on my phone. Her audiobook listens like a podcast with her actual recordings of conversations with heartbreak experts, her friends, and a romantic interest peppered throughout the work. I felt deeply connected to her words for a few reasons. 1. I read Florence's book, The Nature Fix, years earlier. Her journey to understand how nature affects our brains was sparked after her now ex-husband uprooted the life she loved in Boulder, Colorado, for a job opportunity in Washington, D.C. She struggled to maintain the same outdoor pursuits that filled her life in Boulder, and she was falling deeper and deeper into an urban depression. I had struggled in the same way in 2015 when I left Jackson Hole, Wyoming and moved to Minneapolis, Minnesota for love. The Nature Fix didn't come out until 2018, but when I read it, after having moved back to Jackson, I understood the science behind why living in a city after living in a mountain resort was so challenging. I felt validated. I wasn't just a snob floundering among the traffic and littered sidewalks. I was simply a victim of biology. 2. When I began listening to her new book, Heartbreak, in early April, I was still in the shock phase of my most recent breakup. After a year of long distance, my friend of 20 years and I made the decision to move in together. I sold and got rid of most of my belongings, left my job, and moved to Los Angeles from my home in Wyoming to be with him. No, I did not learn from the disaster I had in Minneapolis, but this time I was moving for someone I had been dating for a year and whom I had known since I was in high school. I was also older and wiser. I thought I'd have a better outcome than when I moved out of state for a woman I had met on OkCupid and had known for only a couple of months. Turns out I was wrong. Within 2 months, our relationship fell apart, and though I was willing to put in the work to figure out why things weren't going well and to fix it, he was not, and he asked me to move out. With nowhere to actually move out to and no job, I got rid of most of the few belongings I still had after leaving Wyoming, packed up my car again, and moved cross-country to D.C. to live with my sister on her couch in her studio apartment with my German Shepherd. I am, not doing well. On top of needing a job and as many nachos as I could eat, I needed to not feel so alone in my shattered pieces. I needed to feel empowered, to find purpose out of the severe pain I am in. 3. I've actually met Florence twice, and she's an absolute delight. I met her the first time when she came to Jackson Hole for a reading and signing of The Nature Fix, and a second time when I took her nonfiction writing workshop at the Jackson Hole Writers Conference. Listening to Florence's familiar voice on her audiobook recounting her experiences of her heartbreak felt like listening to a friend. I couldn't believe her husband would abandon her after how she struggled moving to D.C. for him. The fucker. It felt comforting to commiserate with someone, even if it was only a voice on my earbuds. Similar to the validation I felt reading The Nature Fix, I felt validated by the stories and data Florence shared in Heartbreak. I am not, just a crybaby floundering among my painful emotions. I am, simply a victim of biology. And just like in The Nature Fix, there are actual data-driven strategies one can call upon to cope and move forward that are healthier and more effective than, say, binge drinking, self-harm, burying the emotions until you feel nothing, and/or other common heartbroken behavior. I came to dismiss some of the conventional approaches to recovering from rupture, Florence wrote, especially the ideas that you shouldn't form other attachments too quickly, and that the key to healing is the commonly treated bromide of loving yourself first. Both of these exhortations fell short for me. I had to improvise a different course. Ultimately, I would orient toward the far shore of heartbreak through balms much less obvious but supported by evidence: beauty, agency, and purpose. Okay, lady, I'm in this with you. Guide me on the path out of heartbreak. Some of my key takeaways. Heartbreak is actually evolutionarily adaptive in the short term, meaning we are designed to be heartbroken. Not only are the brain molecules associated with heartbreak present when we are pair bonded to respond to heartbreak when it happens, but they're actually created during pair bonding. Like, fuck, why does evolution have to set us up for pain like this? Evolution does us so dirty because the emotional pain drives us to reconnect with our partners after brief periods of separation, to keep us coming back home, either to continue reproducing or for reasons of group safety. That is, for better health outcomes for each partner and offspring. But evolution done fucked up because what is beneficial for short-term separation is actually maladaptive when the split is permanent, causing even more emotional pain and worsening short and long-term health outcomes for the heartbroken. Desperate to refill their depleted love hormones, the heartbroken often resort to less healthy and less effective coping mechanisms, such as self-medicating with alcohol, drugs, food, etc., and attempting desperate grand gestures to try and win their absent partner back. Another strategy often utilized to get one's oxytocin fix after heartbreak is rebounding. But guess what? Rebounding is actually good for your long-term health. Contrary to popular belief, rebounding can actually be of benefit to our long-term health outcomes. People who began new relationships shortly after their former ones ended, or not mentioned in the book, but realistically maybe even before their former ones ended, had better long-term health outcomes even if their rebound relationship ended. This makes sense though. If you've recently been rejected or are otherwise going through a life-altering split, feeling desirable gives you a boost of confidence. Having sex boosts all those feel-good love hormones. Being distracted by a new person replaces all of your painful thoughts of the former person. And going out to dinner and museums and movies, going on hikes and trips that a new relationship is likely to elicit is going to be better for your health than being isolated and eating mint chip ice cream by the half gallon, ruminating about what a piece of shit you are. I will add my own 2 cents about rebounding though. My former relationship was severely stressed because my former partner was, in my opinion, not over his ex. Rebounding with me was probably really great for him, and knowing that his long-term health outcomes are probably still going to be better for him even after we broke up than they would have been had we never been together, while I'm over here gaining 20 pounds, frantically job searching, and navigating severe bouts of crying, makes me resent him just a little bit more. So, rebounding is probably really great for the newly heartbroken, but is probably not so great for the poor fuckers who are being rebounded with. So maybe if you're going to rebound, try to find someone else who is also rebounding so you only risk ruining 2 people's lives instead of 4 people's lives. Finding strength in your individualism is also good for heartbreak. On the opposite side of the spectrum from rebounding, but not all the way across into being a weeping pile of shit, not bathing, and using your shirt as a tissue, is being alone with a new project. Heartbreak is essentially the pain of being rejected. As social creatures, we are designed, quite literally, as you read above, to want to be together. But redefining yourself in a new way, outside of your previous identity of married or divorced or so-and-so's husband, wife, partner, can change your neural pathways about what being rejected or accepted or feeling like you belong really means to your brain and ego. Using this information in my own theory, finding oneself again might be the reason why so many heartbroken people pick up new hobbies or drop bad habits. I know so many people who decided to run a marathon or other long-distance race after being dumped, who decided to buy a Peloton or go to yoga classes. I think there are more reasons behind this than just wanting a revenge body. I think it allows an individual to see themselves in a new identity and to belong to a larger group of people who also identify themselves in a certain way, as a runner, as Peloton, as a yogi. Outside of physical pursuits, who bought a motorcycle? Who went to the Amazon? Personally, I moved to the other side of the country and leaned into my identity as a poet. I began writing a whole new collection of poetry about my breakup. Maybe it will win a Pulitzer. Maybe it'll sit on my computer until I'm dead. Only time will tell. Could these urges to throw ourselves into new or existing endeavors be driven by a need for a sense of identity outside of being coupled? Maybe so. And if so, it works. People who have a goal or a project they're working on after a breakup have an easier time coping with their heartbreak. EMDR can be used to treat a broken heart. Why didn't I think of that? I first learned about EMDR, or eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, from my therapist, who learned about it from Bessel van der Kolk's world-renowned book on trauma, The Body Keeps the Score. EMDR is a psychotherapy technique developed in the 1980s by Francine Shapiro. Essentially, the patient or client follows a moving object, usually the therapist's finger, back and forth with just their eyes. Think of a hypnotist's pocket watch. You're getting very sleepy. But instead of getting very sleepy, patients think about the experiences in their life that have caused them trauma. This technique was first developed to treat PTSD, also the reason I pursued EMDR in the past, but is now becoming integrated into the treatments for a multitude of conditions such as eating disorders, substance use disorders, complicated grief, panic disorders. You get the picture. Here's a very pedestrian explanation of what EDMR is if you're unfamiliar. The left side of the brain is essential for soothing the right side of the brain that holds onto traumatic memories. While the eyes are moving back and forth, stimulating both sides of the brain, the client focuses on the disturbing or intrusive memory or thought. At the core of the traumatic experience is usually a negative self-thought. For example, someone who may have been abused in their life might believe, "I am unlovable," or "I don't deserve to be treated well." During the session, the individual is asked to think of a positive belief to replace the negative one. Even though it is contrived, they might say to themselves, "I didn't deserve to be treated that way," or "I am a good person." Over time, the positive self-thoughts replace the negative ones, and the traumatic memory becomes less and less traumatic. It's not just mumbo-jumbo pseudoscience. I know for myself, my disturbing memories now feel like they happened to someone else instead of me. When I talk about them, it almost feels like I'm telling a story about something that happened to a close friend, not something that happened to me personally. Even though I know my trauma happened to me, I don't feel the acute stress associated with my traumatic memories like I once did. That's because EDMR essentially replaces the negative thoughts and beliefs with the positive ones. Researchers believe EDMR works because the side-to-side movement of the eyes unlocks the left side of the brain, the self-soothing side, and allows it to do its job to comfort the right side of the brain, the side holding onto traumatic memories. As EDMR becomes more and more popular as a tool in psychological healing, could it be used to treat heartbreak? Why not? Finding awe is also a key to healing. Lastly, I want to talk about the concept of awe, that feeling you get when you're overwhelmed by the beauty or meaning of something. If you've ever gotten goosebumps while listening to Bon Iver's Holocene, or felt butterflies in your stomach looking at Kurt Halsey Fredrickson's painting Always Remember, Never Forget, or cried upon viewing the Grand Canyon for the first time, you've experienced awe. Similar to how her work in The Nature Fix describes, people often feel awe while in a forest or on a mountaintop, and this feeling can be a key component to helping us heal from psychological pain. In her book, Heartbreak, Florence described the concept of urgent biophilia, this instinctual, desperate desire to go off into the wilderness and find oneself when one is hurt. After heartbreak, whether over a devastated landscape or a personal loss or a global crisis like a pandemic, it is often nature to which we return. The more uprooted we feel, the more we need the literal rootedness of things with roots. According to brain imaging data, people who have a greater propensity for feeling awe are also more likely to be able to process traumatic events and make meaning in their lives from them. They're able to make narrative coherence from the negative experiences in their lives, which allows for acceptance and therefore healing. And even if you're not a person who is prone to goosebumps, you can actually learn to be more open to awe by looking for beauty and meaning and then reflecting on things you find beautiful or meaningful. Over time, you can cultivate an ability to feel awe, which will build new neural pathways in your brain, making it easier and easier then to feel awe. And ultimately, being able to find beauty and meaning in this dumpster fire of a world we live in helps us to heal from the burns of life more easily. Find a copy of Heartbreak in your local library or favorite indie bookshop, or order it from the publisher, W.W. Norton. To learn more about Florence Williams, you can visit her website.